Rapture is filled corner to corner with detail and history, and the cast of characters that occupy this world are no less dynamic. Every splicer, every level boss has a story. In many ways, these characters are a reflection of their environment, and their environment a reflection of their character. Let's talk about some of the characters in Bioshock. There's so many that fans love, and there are many Wikia pages about them. You know, one thing that I think a lot of fans may not realize is you were telling stories with these characters, you know, a decade ago. And technology today, as we saw in, you know, a game like Infinite, you can do amazing things with facial expressions and storytelling. Conveying that emotion that you did 10 years ago with limited technology was challenging. How hard was it back in the day to sort of, you know, convey story in engine?
We had such a small team that, you know, we had to show Tenenbaum or Atlas. They were just splicer models, right?
Yeah,
Oh, really?
Tenenbaum was Ladysmith, which is, there's a reason that she's in shadow behind glass, and it's not to be dramatic. It's because we couldn't afford to build another.
Really?
Yeah.
So just something as simple as that, like you couldn't afford to build a model.
We didn't have the, yeah, we
didn't have the,
we had a few character models in the game. There's
the
what,
budget
maybe
or
8
the
or 9
time to
character
build a new
models?
character
Really?
model, yeah.
Wow.
So we're like, oh, we'll put her in silhouette behind a light, and people think it's noir.
And so much of it was driven by the voice performance, I feel like, too, because I mean, that it all had to, it was like a radio play in many ways still.
Yeah, we had some really good actors, and I was able to spend a lot of time with them, and the fact that I could write the stuff, direct it, and then rewrite in the room, and the fact that we had actors who were, for whatever reason, you know, I wasn't even in the same room as them. I was on a speakerphone.
Right.
They were in a studio in New York or LA or something. I never met, I don't think I met any of them.
Really? None of the actors in Bioshock you ever met in person when you were making the game?
Maybe since, but at the time I hadn't met a single one of them. Except maybe a couple people, like, you know, I played the Circus of Hours thing. Nate Wells played the Jack on the plane. You know, a couple of people in the studio. It was community theater, you know, in terms of the tech and the sort of time we had for it. But the actors were, you know, we had some exceptional actors.
I will say, as you know, doing animation on that game, that you can hide bad animation behind really good audio, and it makes the animation look better. We didn't have a tech animator. It was me. I'd never rigged characters before, and now I'm rigging characters, trying to figure out how, you know, to get all of these characters out to the animation team. So we're very limited when it came to animation tools.
Yeah,
Since apologize to my animators.
No, but you did the big. I mean, for your first game that you rigged the Big Daddy, which is, you know, it's not an easy character to rig.
It was, you know, we figured it out, but the tools that we had on Infinite were not the tools that we had on Bioshock. So we figured out what we could do and what we could do well, and tried to hide, kind of, you know, put into the darkness the things that we knew we couldn't do very well. And having voice actors of that caliber that can bring those characters to life, you tend to fill in the blanks.
So tell me, friend, which one of the bitches sent you? The KGB wolf or the CIA jackal? Here's the news. Rapture isn't some sunken ship for you to plunder. And Andrew Ryan isn't the giddy socialite who can be slapped around by government muscle.
And you did get to revisit Rapture in the DLC for Infinite, and, you know, with today's technology, or technology from a few years ago, I'm sure it was liberating for you guys in some ways to be able to use that tech to bring the environment and also characters to life. What was that experience like for you guys to go back and sort of revisit Rapture?
It was liberating because we got to revisit it, but we also, I think when we started, thought we'd be able to go reuse some of the old assets, and they just didn't hold up anymore compared to the Infinite assets. So we basically had to rebuild, not just rebuild everything from scratch, we had to reimagine it from scratch because, you know, we had the ability to make it look grander and bigger, but still feel like exactly like Rapture. It is a different kind of, we're making a different kind of experience than Bioshock 1, so it was tricky to make it feel like it was the same kind of game. Because it wasn't, you know, the first one was sort of an action game, the second one was really a stealth game. You know, the Barrel Sea Part 2 was really a stealth game, and you're really telling the story of Elizabeth throughout those things. Yeah. So it was a different lens, but it was also cool because it allowed me to make the whole story about Elizabeth. You know, to have her be central to the franchise from the very beginning, and she was always, you know, she became the heart of it to me, and to have her, it was really exciting for me to make her, you know, her heroism be something that set the events of Bioshock into motion, which eventually, you know, saves all the little sisters. That was really gratifying, a nice way to tie the whole thing up for me.
And you probably didn't have that idea 10 years ago, right? You had to retrofit it all?
I had no idea.
He has a letter that he's addressed to himself that's 10 years old. But, yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, for me, it was a nice way for me to say goodbye to Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite, because, you know, those two worlds together, you know, you don't realize, or I don't think the audience realizes how much time you spend with these characters trying to get them out and polished and into the world. And it was a good opportunity, I think, as a game developer to kind of have that little coda at the end where you're like, okay, I get to, now I'm ready to move on to the next thing. I've had a nice, you know, break. Like, let's seal this off, and now I'm on to the next thing.
And it was like 12 years of our lives, too. Between the very beginning of it, and it was a long time.
Well, I mean, so my daughter, who is 16 now, I did a lot of filming of her when she was 6 as a little sister. Oh, wow. And this was not mocap, I was just running around the office. And I'm like trying to be like, now trip over the thing and pretend you die. Or like, you know, like trying to like not like traumatize a 6-year-old. Yeah, pretend you're drinking something, and you know, and I never showed her the actual game until much later. But she, on BSI, I put her in a mocap suit and actually used her for the little sister in Paris that's running after the balloon. So that was kind of, for me, like a nice
way to connect it all together. Were there any characters on the original game that you found hardest to write? I mean, you mentioned like, you know, recasting Atlas, things like that, but was there a character that was the most challenging for you, Ken?
Well, Atlas, because, you know, he was basically written completely twice. That was very, very tough. And I was very happy about the original character, and I thought I'd really done something great. And then we showed it to people, and they just hated it, and they didn't trust him. And if they didn't trust him, we were screwed. And so it was tough, because we, after having gone through all the recording, to actually have to let the actor go. It's no fault of his own, right? It was on us. He had invested in it, tell him that it wasn't going to happen, and rewrite it from scratch. That was hard, and that was tough. And then after I finished it, I had a debate with somebody on the team who felt the accent was really, really phony. And we had an English person on the team, and he felt the accent was really phony. So at the last minute, we basically ended up doing a focus test in Ireland. To see if people bought the accent, because the actor playing Atlas was Irish, but he was from a different part of Ireland, so he was playing a different kind of Irish accent. I don't think he was from Dublin, and Atlas sort of had a Dublin accent. And so at the last minute, I thought I was going to have to do it again. Oh, wow. And fortunately, the focus test came back, and people loved it.
I don't know how you survived that plane crash, but I've never been one to question Providence. I'm Atlas, and I aim to keep you alive.
And a lot of the villains in the game felt like they were, you know, very much tied to certain levels, and this was, you know, you were still in an environment of levels with Bioshock, right? It wasn't just a big open world. Did that all sort of get designed together? It's like, here's the best villain that's going to fit to this environment and this theme of, you know, this area?
Some of them work better than others. I mean, I think obviously Steinman and especially Sandra Cohen really, I think, dominate in terms of the level boss.
They are their levels.
They are the levels, and some of the characters didn't hold up as well, I don't think, on the writing side. The fun thing about the characters at work, like Simon, where he had all those little displays with the scissors and the tech, you know, like that was stuff the art team came up with to support that character. And obviously Sandra Cohen, in that level, you know, I had this idea for this character, and, you know, as this artist, and taking Andrew Ryan's thinking to the extreme, you know, through a lens of art, was really fun. They were really, I mean, in a lot of ways, they're sort of like more like Batman villains than they are like actual, you know, real world villains. That they all have a, you know, the Joker cares far more about the humor and the dark humor that he has, and the Riddler cares more about the riddles than he actually does about money. You know, like, the money, the crime is this afterthought. It's the philosophy. And so these characters have a lot in common with, and there's probably a lot of inspiration taken from sort of characters like the Joker in terms of a guy like any of the characters in Bioshock, because they were really driven by their ideology, but their ideology is a mask for their sense of selves, right? You know, this stuff is really, Cohen knows he's a hack, and he doesn't want to, you know, he can't admit that to himself, so he has to wrap himself in all this nonsense, because the last thing he could ever do is look in the mirror and say, I'm not much of an artist.
No need to thank me for jamming the transmissions of those boors, Atlas and Ryan. Let them have their squabble. The artist, yes, The artist knows there is richer earth to till.